Are you the assistant manager of a store or a restaurant or a hotel or a site, or are you an assistant coach or perhaps an assistant principal? Maybe you're an SVP or an executive director or a COO or a CFO. If you have people below you reporting to you and people above you telling you what to do and giving you your marching orders, this 4-part series is for you. Right now, you're walking a tightrope between prodigious possibilities and precarious peril. I want to help you get to the top, not fall off the rope and feel your career smashed to the ground. Last week in episode 18, I talked about my neighbor JD and his high-profile vice position and how so many of you are out there in the vice, squeezed from above, squeezed from below. And I provided you with a 5-part framework to evaluate that job, to see why maybe it's not as fulfilling as you would like it to be. And I heard a lot of good feedback about that. But I also heard from a lot of you that said, man, that's great, Ben, to give me kind of the 30,000-foot view of this, as if I have time to just sit back and reflect about my job. And many of you said, I am so squeezed right now, so stressed out, so just pushed from all ends that I don't have time for that. I've got to figure out right now, here and now, how to navigate the day-to-day of my middle job. And you feel stuck, you feel powerless, you feel like you're just so much in the weeds, and all this pressure, not only in your job, but also outside of your job to pay your mortgage or pay your rent and make your car payment so that doesn't get repoed, and just kind of all these things that are coming down, relationships. And so I thought, you know what, you're right. And so let's get in the weeds in these middle management jobs. Let's talk about kind of what's going on, because so often we're so fixated on just the day-to-day, moment-to-moment, that we're not seeing kind of all the pressures that are squeezing us. And I think the more we can understand what's going on with us and with the wider kind of economic and work landscape, the better equipped we're going to be to do that. And so I've created a 4-part middle management series for you to understand these exact forces that are squeezing you and how to ultimately climb from the top. I don't want you to be stuck. So I encourage you, I am pumped about this. Just give me the next 4 episodes. Take it a listen. Listen on your way home from work, or, while you're working out, or whatever that is, gardening, cooking dinner. Just give this a listen. I guarantee you are going to get so much out of this. You're going to feel like you're gaining the control back about your life, and you're going to begin to get super pumped about what possibilities are out there. So today I want to look at 4 reasons why your middle position is precarious, why you feel just that underlying peril. But I want to give you also 2 reasons, because I don't want to just be negative here, of why you should feel hopeful about the future and the possibilities that it holds. In subsequent episodes, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th episode of this series, I'll share best practices for improving your odds for success. How do you interact with the people above you? What are the mistakes you don't want to make? And what are the things you can do to position yourself well? And then how do you position yourself with your subordinates? How do you interact with those who are your direct reports? How do you get the most out of your teams? And then finally, I'll get into that last piece of how do you hit the sweet spot in your job? How do you do your job in a way that goes beyond just checking off the boxes and your duties on your job description, and makes you stand out from all the other middle managers that are also looking to move up? So the first thing I think is always important is to get real. Kind of, where are we at? Let's take stock of this. And the reality is, being in the middle of an organization stinks. You're paid just enough that you have to care, and care a lot. But you have so many headaches and hassles and stress, but not enough to make it worthwhile. You're not paid all that well, let's be honest. And you have a little bit of authority, but not enough to really shape the organization or set the course for things. Many of you I talk to, just this word comes up again and again, powerless. I feel powerless in this middle job. I just feel like I'm kind of navigating things, and I really haven't been trained up, and I don't have a lot of authority, and I'm just kind of adrift out there. And you think about it and you start to operationalize that. Well, most of the people below you, right, that report to you were probably hired by someone else, right? Probably HR hired them. It's unlikely you had the direct hiring capabilities of your team. Or maybe you inherited them because you've come on and they were already there. And not only that, you're in an organizational structure that you didn't design. And yet all this structure you're stuck with and the people you're stuck with, they determine your performance. They are your measuring stick. And yet you don't control their pay. You don't control their incentives. You don't hire them, all of that. But ultimately, you're somehow responsible for their performance. And so you have to care about this. And not only that, you have to care and stress about work beyond working hours. But those people under you, boy, it's a little bit envious of their position because they clock in and they clock out. They go to the lake or they do whatever, watch TV, go for a run at the end of the night, and they don't give another thought to their dishwashing job or their front desk job or their cleaning job or whatever their job is, because that's your job to care about that. So they can leave it behind. Here's another real kick in the pants if you're in middle. Some of the people reporting to you make more money than you do. In many restaurants, the servers and the bartenders make way more than the manager or the assistant manager that they report to. I was talking to one friend of mine, and he's an assistant manager at a restaurant. And he was telling me, he said, it sucks that the server and the bartender, I know they make more. When they have a good night of tips, they make way more than me. But he said the real kick in the pants was, he said, we were having trouble as an organization getting bus people to clear the table and reset it with the silverware and the glass and all that. And he said, so my boss decided we were going to go to a temp service and hire a busser. And he said the kick in the pants was that busser came in and was paid a higher hourly wage than I was being paid. And he said that was the last straw. He was like, I can't do it. I can't have a busser off the street with zero skills who has no stress about this job. They come in, they throw the stuff in a bus tub, they bring it back to the dishwasher, and at the end of the night, after repeating that for a few hours, they go home. Meanwhile, I'm trying to make budgets and motivate people and cover with people who called off for the 10th time, but HR won't let me fire them and continues to saddle me with them. He's like, I'd had enough. And so he walked away, and he was a really good manager. And it kind of speaks to this just general situation where you just feel disrespected in many of these situations. In many hotels, you think about the assistant general manager, right? In many hotels, the entire sales department makes more than them, and most department heads make more than them. So the department head who's over housekeeping or front desk, they're making more than the assistant manager. And yet theoretically, right, the assistant GM is second in command. That's not really the case, though. We all know that. So nobody wants to dwell too long in the middle. It is a precarious place, and your goal should be to make it through that as quickly and safely as possible. So in this series, I want to give you the framework and the tips to stop being powerless and take control of your future. I want you to be aware of the headwinds you're facing and help you lean into them. So let's start by exploring the 4 reasons why the middle is perilous. First, at the macro level right now in the current economy, companies are actively cutting middle positions to save money and to position themselves for an economic downturn. According to Sean Cole, a founding partner and executive search consulting firm Cowen Partners, the middle management, the VP levels, those ranks are gutted right now. Forbes magazine recently cited a study that 44%, that's almost half, of all companies have made significant cuts to their middle positions. So just in general, people are making their organizations a little more lean, and those cuts are the easiest in the middle. And so that's what's been happening. And you may have felt that in your organization. Maybe there were 5 of you doing what you do, and now there's 4 or 3 or 2, or you're the only one left. So these are bigger things. So that's the first thing, these kind of macro cuts. Second thing is AI. Companies are testing or piloting what their organizations would look like if AI takes on a bigger role in middle management. Well, and this is across. It's also at the top and bottom. But the middle seems to be where they're focused right now because these decisions are made by the top. So they're obviously not going to AI themselves out of a job. And a lot of the positions at the bottom, we're still not there on the technology for how to have a AI do particular low-end positions. So the middle is kind of the sweet spot, right? And we are just at the infancy of the AI wave. That is just beginning to form that wave on the employment landscape. But not surprisingly, who's leading the way on this? It's tech companies, Google, Meta, Amazon. They are on the leading edge of this revolution. And these three companies recently eliminated thousands of mid-organization jobs. So you may be a mid-level employee in a hotel chain or a restaurant or a retail location, and you think, oh, everything's status quo. They haven't done that to me. But I can almost guarantee you that somewhere in your organization, they are testing that. So you may be in Des Moines, Iowa, and your position is fine, and it's the status quo. But the reality is they may be testing AI in your position in California or in Texas or in some other part of the country. And as soon as they figure that out, if they think it's working and it's viable, guess what? They're going to roll that out company-wide. And so we've only begun to see this AI at the center of middle management. So you've got the macro level cuts. You've got AI as the second wave of cuts. And the third thing on a micro level, you are the easiest scapegoat when things aren't going well at the top. Your organization has a bad quarter or a bad review. You are in the perfect position to be cut. You represent the perfect top-level solution to failure because you serve as one part scapegoat and the other part cost savings. So a top-level person can say, well, Tim wasn't performing all that well. And I just feel like, we can right-size the company a little bit if we save that 50 grand or 100 grand or 200 grand or whatever your pay is. So win-win, right? For the top, not a win-win for you because you're out of a job. And then we're back to that. How do you pay your mortgage or your rent and not get your car repossessed? So you're an easy scapegoat. Think about why you're in your position. Maybe you're in your current position because your predecessor was scapegoated for organizational failure. Think about who you replaced. And if they were scapegoated, guess what? Pretty good chance you're going to be scapegoated. One of the assistant positions I feel the most sorry for, and I'm a big sports fan, is the assistant coaches in professional sports. Because if the head coach has a down year, guess what? They go in and they have this big meeting with the owners, and the owner's like, yeah, we got to shake things up. Their only move short of firing the head coach is, all right, let's let the assistants go. And so all of a sudden, your offensive and defensive coordinator who've performed really well, they've got to go because someone has to be scapegoated, right? The funniest one is in baseball when the coach is the manager's a little bit on the hot seat, and all of a sudden the first and third base coach are like fired. And you're thinking, okay, yeah, this season was 12 games below 500 because the first base coach didn't do his job well. We didn't steal second enough times. I mean, come on, really? First base coach, let's be honest, is the guy hands you his batting gloves and then puts on his little mitt to slide into second, right? So you're really not at fault. But that's a position they can scapegoat. And that happens in so many organizations. Or you hear these phrases, we just needed to shake things up, or the message was getting a little stale. Important to get some fresh voices in the room. How many of you have heard that? Does any of this really make sense? No, it doesn't. But it's the whole scapegoating thing. And the peril in the middle also happens in addition to the scapegoating at this micro level when you have an insecure leader at the top. And boy, this is a big, big problem. There's a guy I really like to read. His name's Jack Barsky. He's a former KGB spy. And that right there is just cool enough, right? But he's also a business mentor. And he recently had this incredible LinkedIn post about how the top leaders in organizations are sabotaging the people just below them. That's you. He says, there's no middle ground. I've seen it too many times. A divisional GM hires a world-class operator, then sabotages their authority. A strong CEO brings in a seasoned COO, then just undercuts them at meetings. An SVP hires a proven leader, then second guesses every move they make. Barsky continues, a CEO fired his best hire, not because that exec failed, but because the CEO felt threatened. He couldn't admit it at first, said it was a, quote, culture misfit, said the exec wasn't aligned. Well, you've heard that before. Said he needed someone more adaptable. But when I pressed him, the truth spilled out. He made me feel replaceable. So you've got to be careful because there are a lot of bad, insecure leaders at the top of organizations. And if you start making them feel threatened or the sun starts shining too brightly on you, some of these insecure leaders, instead of saying, wow, I'm building up my organization, because good leaders want the best minds. A really good leader wants people smarter than them all around them. But a lot of people, a lot of leaders aren't that secure. And so as soon as you start shining too brightly, they cut you loose. So at the micro level, you have got to be careful because you're just this prime target to scapegoat top level inefficiency and failure. And you're also on a personal level, you can be perceived as a threat. So that's a huge landmine for so many people in the middle. And fourthly, the middle is perilous because the meat grinder you operate in makes you susceptible to burnout, anxiety, depression, strained or broken relationships outside of work, divorce, even suicide. The suicide rate, if you look at the three stratas of organizations, top, middle, and lowest, suicide rate far and away the highest in the middle. It's part of what I talked about. It's feeling no power over what you're doing, and yet just that squeeze, that crunch, and having no skills to be able to do your job. I was talking to one high-level executive recently, and he confided at me that the top just keeps heaping more and more and more responsibility on him, but doesn't provide any additional resources to accomplish the tasks or even any more compensation for the work he's doing. And so this mid-manager tries to get more efficient, tries to push his team harder, tries to do better with technology. But you can only squeeze that so hard, so far. And in the end, the heaps of extra work just continues to encroach more and more into his days. He said, I go in earlier, I stay later. I'm working more and more and more on weekends. Half my PTO now and vacation time, I don't even use it because this organization just keeps throwing so much. Here's the reality. At some point, we are human. At some point, something has to give. At some point, something will break. Is it your mental health? Is it your marriage? Is it the way you do your job? Is it your parenting relationships? Or is it something else? Because you're not a robot. You are a human being and you operate in a perilous state as a middle employee. So that's kind of the downside, the negative, what you're walking through, the minefield. Some macro changes that are cutting positions, AI, which is really hard, micro changes where organizations are going to scapegoat you. And then just this fourth thing, which is more your internal, is just you get squeezed so hard you eventually implode and you walk away. But here are the possibilities. The first thing is, and this is a good sign, 10,000, this is a staggering number, 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every single day. And that is expected to happen, this is in the United States, for the next 5 years. Now, not all these people, the 10,000 a day, are the top level leaders in their organizations, but man, a lot of them are, which means a lot of the top chairs, a lot of them are going to be open and they all need filled. And then the second bit of good news, because those four things we talked about that are why your position's in peril, those four things are shrinking the number of people in the middle to some of the lowest levels we've seen in a long, long time. So you got people retiring, and then because of market contractions, AI, bad bosses, retirements, and resignations, there are fewer middle employees that are positioned to move up to the top chairs. So there's less competition. That's good, right? People leaving, less competition to take their positions. Now, the reality is there will always be strong competition to ascend to be the top leader of an organization's. But right now, organizations have increasingly weak benches. So if you can avoid the landmines of leading in the middle of your organization and create a strong body of results, you could soon find yourself perched in the corner office. That should make you super pumped. Which brings me back to the two words for those of you in the middle: peril and possibility. Your middle job is in peril, but if you embrace the possibilities, there is a bright future for you ahead. I want to help you figure out how to move up. And therein lies the opportunity. Therein lies the gold. So I would encourage you, if you are in a middle position and you want to talk specifically, get intentional about taking control of your career and figuring out a game plan. I would love to collaborate with you. I would love to help you move from the middle to the top in your career. Just click on the book a free complimentary 30-minute exploratory call and let's dig into this a little bit more. I would love to learn more about you and to help you get from where you are to where you want to be.
We all know how easy it is to get wrapped up in our own work and never take a break. Well, I've had it, and I'm flipping the script on that. I'm taking a 40-day sabbatical to rest, relax, and do things that make my heart sing. Along the way, I'll be sharing my amazing adventures. Check out the daily updates on our YouTube page or the SuperPumped Life podcast, or just click the link in the description or the video link on the screen to check out this great series.
Are you the assistant manager of a store, restaurant, hotel, assistant site manager, assistant coach, perhaps an assistant principal? Or maybe you're a vice president or an SVP or an executive director or a COO or a CFO. If you have people below you reporting to you, but also you have people above you, you're in a middle management position. And this 4-part series is to help you reclaim control of your life, your career, and your future. Last week in episode 19, we talked about how you're walking through a perilous minefield, but there are also possibilities out there as you attempt to navigate your way to the top. Today, I want to share 3 tips from the top that will help you ascend out of the middle and to a top position that you will be super pumped about. For more than 2 decades, I was the top leader of several companies that I either founded or acquired or that I was in a partnership in. And so I have had lots of middle managers, a mistake I see over and over and over with middle leaders. And I can't say this clearly enough. Stop sucking up. I don't want to be your drinking buddy. I don't want your holiday gift. Now, that may sound mean and that may sound heartless, but I have enough of everything I need. In fact, I want you to take those dollars that I'm paying you, which I wish were a lot more, and spend those on you, spend those on your family, spend those on your kids. No way should you be wasting that money you have on me. Put it in your kid's 529 plan. There's a famous scene, if you remember, from the movie Christmas Vacation, where the character Clark Griswold, he really wants a big holiday bonus. And so he buys something, I can't remember what it is, and he goes and bum to the executive suite, to the very top dog in his organization. And he says, hey, I brought you something for Christmas. And then he goes over to the credenza, and there are, it looks like dozens of the exact same gift lined up on there. And then the boss fakes a phone call, even though the line you hear it. And it shows how ridiculous it is, because it shows that Clark wasn't the only one trying to suck up to the boss. Lots of other people were doing the same. And as one who has been at the top, I see that over and over. It's not just you that are coming thinking, hey, sucking up's the playbook that's going to get me to the top. But it's everybody else in your position. So you're the middle on this shift, but there's a middle on the next shift and the next shift. And there's a middle at another location, and that begins to compound. So here's the reality. Even if your boss has an open door policy, I don't want you standing in my doorway chewing the fat about how the local team did in the game last night. Let's think about this from 2 levels. I have a high level, results driven job that I don't have enough hours in the day to get all my work done. So every minute you're standing in that doorway, you're keeping me from doing my job. You're forcing me to be there a minute or 10 minutes or 30 minutes longer, right? And that stinks. And I begin to resent that. I begin to resent this guy who's just trying to suck up is making me get home later for dinner, miss my kid's baseball game, whatever that is. But the other thing, do you know what I'm thinking? Every minute you're standing in my doorway trying to curry favor, I'm thinking, don't you have a job to do? Why are you wasting time here? Are you avoiding the real work you should be doing? And so every minute you're there, I'm thinking, you're sucking time away from me and you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Now, how does that make me feel about you? You think that makes me think, boy, I really want that person to be the next successor in this organization, or I really want to write them that killer recommendation for a job they apply for somewhere else? No. It makes me think, you don't know what you're doing. And so the only kind of pedestrian play in your playbook is to come suck up to me. So don't do that. Do not do the blowing smoke game. It doesn't work. It's not effective. Now, some of you, and I know you, you're going to say, wait a minute, my boss needs that. My boss kind of has everybody come and kiss the ring. And I think maybe all of us have been in organizations like that, right? That your boss just expects the rank and file to come up and tell them how great they are and praise them and be like, you're the best. If you have that kind of boss, I'm going to tell you, be careful. There's a great post, and I mentioned it in episode 19 from Jack Barsky. It's on LinkedIn. You can look it up. But he talks about these bosses that are insecure. Because when they're insecure and they want you to come kiss the ring, guess what? They're threatened by you if you're competent. If you're doing a good job, guess what? At some point, that level of, that person's a threat. Your head's going to get chopped off. They are going to get rid of you. So if you're in an organization where the boss requires that, you ought to be polishing up that resume, figuring out how to get a connection and get somewhere else. Because ultimately, you can either do it for yourself and you can self-parachute out of that organization, or at some point, they will parachute you out, probably with no parachute. They'll just throw you out of the plane. Now, this brings me to my second bit of advice. The first one, stop sucking up. But the second one is, if you're a number two, be prepared. Be prepared for your moment to step into the number one role. I want to tell you a story. I was talking to a friend who is at the top of IT in a mid-sized company down in Arkansas. The CEO and his company had had a death in the family, and the CEO needed to be off the week of their 400-person annual town hall meeting. And so normally the kind of format is the CEO goes through a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then he kind of pumps the rank and file up about some of the things they're doing well. And then he talks about the state of the company, and he then maybe gives 2 or 3 challenges of things that either are coming in the next quarter or the next few quarters and what they need to be working on, or maybe some competitors that are creating kind of a threat to the company. And then at the end, he fields questions from anybody in the organization. Can basically go to the microphones. They've got 2 or 3 there in the auditorium, and they can talk about anything they want, whether it's operations, sales, customer service, big topics, anything like that. They might talk about tariffs. And so in this particular case, my friend was telling me how the CEO was out that week. And so the COO was asked to step in. And so I think the meeting was on a Thursday, and it came time, and everybody was assembled in the large auditorium. And the first thing was the IT guy said to the COO, do you have anything? We usually kind of work on the back end to make sure your presentation is flawless. And the CEO said, no, I don't have a formal presentation. And then my friend looked and he saw he doesn't even have any notes. And he thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. And so he wasn't ready for the big moment. And my friend knew it before that moment even arrived. And this COO, he kind of awkwardly walked to the podium, and you can tell when someone's not confident, right? The first thing he did, he didn't present anything about the company. He just said, does anybody have any questions? And everyone was bewildered, because normally that comes a few minutes into this whole company-wide town hall. Nobody raised their hand. Nobody headed to the mic. And he barely waited. And it was this, my friend said, it was this like grueling, awkward silence in this room. You could hear a pin drop. And the COO was like, okay, if nobody has anything, meeting dismissed. He said the meeting lasted less than 1 minute. And everyone in the company was shocked. And some of the employees had driven from more remote areas of the region, 2 or 3 hour drive. And there was nothing. I asked my friend, I said, well, was that like death in the family that morning? And CEO literally like ran out the door 10 minutes before the thing. My friend said, no, he was off the entire week. This town hall was on a Thursday, and the CEO had been gone all week. The COO had the entire week to prepare, and came up empty. 4 days to prepare that speech. Really, he'd had an entire length of his career at that company to prepare that speech. But he wasn't ready. He had no clue. He seemed to have no clue what the CEO did or what he should do in filling in that thing. Now, let me tell you about someone who was ready to lead. I was just over a year into a startup commercial cleaning business in Dayton, Ohio, and we were booming. We were going gangbusters. We'd already blown past the $1 million in revenue mark. We were expanding our facilities, employees, customer base. We were really on a good upward trajectory. And concurrently, because I always like to do 2 or 3 things at the same time, I was in seminary. And so, as luck would have it, that summer I was required to do a full-time summer placement, ministry training formation thing. And so I knew it was going to be rough given I'm, the founder of a startup business, but I figured I could handle it because I would get a local placement, right? Well, imagine my surprise when I was placed in Washington, D.C. for 10 weeks. Now, if you want to test your people and your systems independent of the founder, yank the founder out of the business completely at this early stage of a startup and see what happens. Boy, you get a really good taste of whether this thing has legs or not. In this case, my second in command, Randy, did a fantastic job. He ran the company confidently and competently. And we were still rolling along 10 weeks later when I returned from DC. And because he ran things so well, guess what he got? He got a raise, which is awesome. And he also got a promotion. But he had to keep those added responsibilities. Those things he did when I was away for those 10 weeks, guess what? They just moved from my plate to his plate. That was awesome as a top dog. But it was also great for him because he gained more control over his fate. And then guess what it allowed me to do? It allowed me to turn my attention to market expansion. And instead of just being a Dayton, Ohio business, I bought a franchise in Cincinnati, and we moved into Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. And you know what I did? I turned the Dayton operations over to Randy because he did such a good job filling in that summer I was in DC. He became the number 1 in Dayton and never looked back. Now, a famous national example of this idea of being ready is Tom Brady. Most of you have heard of him, but for those who haven't, he is a quarterback in the professional sport of football. And when he started his career, he was the number 2. He was the backup to all-pro quarterback Drew Bledsoe in New England. And Bledsoe was a good quarterback. But you know what happened? Bledsoe got hurt. Football's a violent game. People go down. And do you know who was ready to step in? Tom Brady. He stepped in as the number 1 quarterback. He took his opportunity and he ran with it. He performed brilliantly. He led the Patriots to the Super Bowl and went on to become the greatest of all time, the GOAT. Meanwhile, do you know what happened to Bledsoe? Bledsoe was traded away to the Bills the next season. Then he went to the Cowboys, and he was still a fine quarterback. But the point here is you never know as a number 2 when you're going to get your shot. So pay attention to what the role entails. Keep notes of how you would do things. Be prepared. If you're the assistant manager of a store or a restaurant or a hotel or an assistant coach or an assistant principal, be ready. Life happens. Here's the reality. People get sick. People do dumb stuff and get themselves in trouble, and the board fires them. People move away. People retire. People crack and decide, I can't do this anymore. So if you have assistant in your title and dream of moving up to the top job, stop sucking up and pay attention to what the top dog does. And be ready, because chances are you're going to get your opportunity to test drive that top position. The third thing I want to talk to you about, and it goes hand in hand with why sucking up is such a bad idea, is if you're in an organization of much size, and Randy's kind of a special case exception in my organizations, but there's a misunderstanding that the current top leader is going to pick their successor. And that really isn't the case, because in smaller privately held companies like some of the ones I owned, my exit plan is when I sell. And guess what? That means there's a new leadership coming in. So they're ultimately going to decide the fate of who moves up, who doesn't move up. It's not going to be me. But in larger organizations, it might be private equity who's deciding. it might be a board, it might be the ownership group. Those are the people who really decide, because most of the time in organizations, when the top dog resigns or retires, that organization moves on very quickly. As soon as you say you're done, you're a lame duck, and guess what? The train rolls on. It doesn't stop. The board doesn't say, oh, tell us who you think should be the successor. So as a number two, if there's anyone you want to be on good terms with, it's the group the CEO reports to. Think about that. When your board of directors or your ownership group meets or comes to your workplace, or you're invited to corporate, man, try to figure out how to get in front of them. And not in a threatening way, because that can get your head lopped off with an insecure top dog in your organization, but just get familiar with them and kind of get a sense of what they're looking for. If you're privy to go to those meetings where the CEO is reporting to them about things and they start asking questions, you're going to get a real clear idea what matters to them. Because a lot of times they're going to be banging on the CEO about certain things, whether it's market share or whether it's stock price or whether it's rolling out new ideas or, kind of expansion or contraction, whatever that is. Listen intently, figure that out, and then begin to formulate what you would do if you were in that role. Because a lot of times you'll see this. Your CEO has no clue on those. They don't have answers. So be the one that has answers, because you're kind of reading the tea leaves. If they're banging on your CEO for the third quarterly meeting in a row about something, chances are they're going to be replacing that CEO. And if you've come up with a plan of how to fix that problem, of how to be the solve, and you have an opportunity to interview for that position, you may be in the top dog's position sooner rather than later. So be prepared. Be ready. If you are a vice or an assistant out there, remember, your position is precarious. Your positions are being eliminated, but there are possibilities to move up as people retire, as people go away, as people are cut. So as a middle, I'm imploring you from the top, stop sucking up. Don't do that. It's a bad look. Secondly, be prepared. And finally, try to get yourself engaged with those real decision makers. Try to understand what makes them tick, what they're seeking, and be ready, be prepared to offer what you have to offer about that. If you need executive coaching and a specific game plan to move from the middle to the top in your career, man, I would be super pumped to talk to you. Just book a free exploratory call. Let's talk things through a little bit, and then we can kind of game plan about what that would look like and how we would do that. But I would love to hear from you and help you get from where you are to where you want to be. Get you unstuck.
If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on SuperPumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this Super Pumped adventure. If you enjoyed today's show, I would be so grateful if you told your friends about it, and also if you subscribed or followed us so that you don't miss future episodes. If you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day Super Pumped adventure in the wilderness.
Today we continue our 4-part series on how to move from the middle of your organization to the top. If you're a COO, CFO, SVP, VP, in a large organization, or the assistant manager of a store, restaurant, hotel, or an assistant coach or an assistant principal, anything where the assistant term is in your title, this episode is for you. If you have people above you you have to report to, and people below you that report to you and your performance is dictated by, listen on. Last week in episode 20, I shared 3 tips from the top of organizations based on my experience. Super quick review. Stop sucking up. Be ready when your moment comes to step in for the number one, and learn who the real decision maker is for that top job in your organization, because it's probably not the person who's sitting in the chair now. But today I'm really excited. I am super pumped because I want to talk about some of the things I learned from my 3-year deep dive into really low-level entry positions. And I was doing all kinds of things, moving heavy objects, bussing tables, scooping ice cream, cleaning, washing dishes, serving pizza. And here's the dirty little secret I have for you people that are in the middle and at the top. The people at the very, very bottom of the organization, and I'll say we because I've been part of that for the last 3 years, make or break you. We, the entry-level workers, determine your customer satisfaction, your Yelp reviews, your Google rating. We decide whether we work hard for you or whether we hide in all sorts of places on the clock where you have no idea where we are. We can engage and do great work, but we can also undermine the very viability of your business. I've seen it all these past 3 years. Man, have I seen it all. Stealing, getting high in cars, literally doing nothing for an entire shift. I was on a shift, 4-hour shift. I watched a woman roll one set of silverware. That means she took a cloth napkin, she folded it in a triangle, and she took a knife, a spoon, and a fork and rolled it into a little thing that you would sit down at a table and that would already be there. That was it. 15 seconds of work, but you paid 4 hours for that. And you had no idea. Do you think that $100 was well spent? Now imagine magnifying it across hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees all across your company, that low level of productivity. And you wonder why you're just not meeting your goals, right? It comes down to a lot of these people at the bottom. So if you want to motivate me as a low-level worker to work hard for you and to help you meet your goals and to help you move up in the organization, the first thing I'm going to tell you as someone from the bottom is learn my name. Because that says I matter enough for you to put it in your brain who I am. When mids and uppers call people by their position, it is dehumanizing. And it happens more than you think. It happens all the time. Hey, dishwasher. Hey, housekeeper. Hey, cashier. One of my favorites is hey, temp or hey, upshifter. I was working at a national water park resort chain. I'm not going to give the name, but the manager kept calling the temp ice cream girl. Hey, ice cream girl, could you do that? Hey, ice cream girl, the line's getting a little too long. Now, this guy was a double threat manager. He was both demeaning and sexist. Wow. His path to the top is definitely going to be blocked. The temp, though, didn't say a word. This went on for the beginning part of the shift. And after it happened one too many times, guess what? She took off her apron fairly quietly. She laid it on the counter and she walked out. I never saw her again, and neither did that manager. But guess who was stuck scooping ice cream the rest of the shift? You guessed it, the demeaning, sexist middle manager. And guess what happened about halfway through that shift when Mr. Middle Manager was scooping ice cream? The top manager came by and he had this confused look on his face. And he said to the mid, I thought you had a temp to do this tonight. And the middle manager kind of stammered, blah, blah, and he was sputtering. And he said, it just didn't work out. Now, in that moment, do you think that top manager thought, boy, this middle manager is scooping ice cream. This is my successor. This is someone who has top of the company ticketed all over him. No, he's thinking you couldn't even get a temp to do their job for one shift. Names matter. Now, imagine if it was reversed. What would you think if, as he said, ice cream girl was like, hey, manager, I could use an extra set of hands over here. You'd kind of bristle at that, wouldn't you? You'd be like, who are you calling me that? Who are you ordering me around? I recall I was bussing tables at Frisch's Big Boy, and that's a company, Cincinnati company, but the Big Boy brand's a little wider than that. And I was doing it during a busy Saturday morning brunch slam. And the place was packed. And the manager kept saying to me, hey, temp, we need you to clean table 17. Hey, temp, can we get more plates on the buffet line? Hey, temp, I need a high chair for table 9. And after a few minutes of that, I'd had enough. And so what do employees do when they've had enough? They just kind of clock out. Not physically clock out because they want to continue to get paid, but mentally they clock out. And that's when they go and hide. And so I was like, where can I go? And I thought, well, I'll go out to the back dock. That's usually where a lot of the people hide and they smoke and different things. And I went out there and half the crew was out there. And they were all talking about how much they hated their manager. And it was just, they were having a good old time, doing nothing on the clock, basically blasting that manager. I enjoyed that for a little while, a little sick fun. You can as a temp because it doesn't matter that much. And I went back in, and what did I see? I saw that middle manager, and they looked like a chicken with their head cut off. They were running or trying to run this restaurant with only half a crew. And they were trying to seat people because the hostess wasn't there. And they were trying to bust tables because I was out in the back. And they were trying to drop checks. They were even trying to cook. And I thought, this is all so simple. It could have been avoided. Learn my name. Don't call me Hey Temp. And if you can't remember it, here's a little trick. Make me wear a name tag. Pretty simple, right? Use mnemonic devices to figure out it's Super Sally or Beautiful Ben, whatever that mnemonic is. Figure out a way to learn those names because it matters. Once you've learned the name, second thing, train me up. Now start with the basics, and I mean the basics. When I come into work on my first day, where do I leave my coat or my purse or the lunch I packed? Which fridge do I put it in? I can't put it in just a general fridge in the kitchen if it's a restaurant because that might be a health violation. Where do I put that? Where are the restrooms? When do I get a break? What's the cell phone policy? Can I be on my phone, not on my phone? Do I only get to use my phone when I'm on break? When is my break? Can I get something to drink? Can I order a meal? What are kind of the basic ground rules? These little things that you think they're insignificant. Oh, they'll figure it out. A lot of managers said, they'll figure it out. They don't. And it just builds up this unnecessary level of stress. Remember, when you're starting a job of any sort, try to put yourself in that anxiety-provoking time. You know nothing. You're like a blank slate. And so when you stress folks out at the bottom end of the pay scale, they bolt. Do you know that there's a high percentage of new hires that never make it through their first week? So think about what's your percentage closing the first week, the first month, the first 3 months? And if you're losing people right out the door after a shift or half a shift, go back to basics. Make sure they're comfortable in that position. Now, once you've covered the basics, do some job-specific training. And I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples. I was a temp dishwasher at a country club. And in the middle of the dinner rush, they had two things going on. They had their normal people eating dinner in the dining room, and then they have kind of an event space. And they were having a 200-person wedding reception in the banquet room. So I'm in the middle of washing dishes for this, and it was really busy. And do you know what happened? The dishwasher stopped working. And I was like, where's my boss? And I couldn't find him anywhere. And I'm asking people around, why isn't the dishwasher working? And of course, nobody else wants to be bothered with the dishwasher's work because that's at the low end of the back of the house. Either that or they hadn't worked the dishwasher and they didn't know. So anyway, no one knows how to get the dishwasher back on. Meanwhile, all these dishes keep coming in from the 200 plate dinner and the restaurant, and they're piling up because people, the busters, they just want to run that stuff back to the dish tank, drop it, and be gone. And so they're piling it up. Do you know what happens? Eventually the pile gets unstable. And all of a sudden you just hear this. It all crashes to the ground, or a big portion of it. If you've ever been in a restaurant where a server loses a tray and it all bashes to the ground on the tile floor, you know what I'm talking about. It's like this big, loud explosion. It's jarring. And so this happens. And all of a sudden we've got broken glass everywhere, which is a safety hazard. And the dishes are still piling up. And now there's no clean plates for the cooks, and they're yelling. And the servers are like, where's my food? This table's been waiting too long. And meanwhile, the cook's like, I made your food, but it's burning on the grill because you don't have a plate. And it's all backing up, all because you didn't train the dishwasher to clean out something that mandatorily, once it gets filled to a certain point, just kills the dishwasher. And so that's what happened in that club. And in the middle of all this chaos, the middle manager then comes back and he's trying to get the dishwasher cleaned out and the pile of dishes. And because that noise, that crashing of dishes, the general manager of the country club comes back and he is livid. And he just tears into that middle manager. Like, why is this happening? This is on your watch. You're responsible for this. And it was a really bad scene. And do you know why? All because this middle manager didn't take 2 minutes to show me how to operate and clean out the machine. Now, on the flip side, I was working at an event center. It was actually 3 weddings. And it's amazing. Couples or their parents, hopefully, are spending tens of thousands of dollars on wedding receptions. But yet the success of the event, nobody tells you this, rests on a handful of untrained hourly workers. Nobody tells you that when you're booking the venue for your blessed event and picking the menu and who's going to be the band and all of that, right? The photographer and the flowers, that you're playing roulette with whether your server or your bartender has any interest in making this the best party of your life, or just mailing it in as the plates pile up on your table and your drink is empty for half the night. So in this particular venue, there were 3 separate wedding receptions, and there were about a dozen of us new hires reporting to duty. And as soon as we arrived, we kind of were held in a little room and welcomed, and they offered us a water, something simple. And then the manager pulled us into his office and he introduced himself. He told us to just go around, give your first name. And then he said, "I'm really grateful you're here tonight. I'm glad you're working with us tonight." Then he gave us each his business card and he said, "That's my personal cell phone number. If you have any questions during the course of the night, step out of the room you're working in so you're not doing this in front of the client, and then text me or call me. Happy to answer anything. I will be there for you." Then he goes and he gives us matching vests and bow ties. So then we're matching the regular staff on his team. And he begins to explain how we're going to serve the food, how we're going to do our overall flow of the night. We're going to drop salads and then main course, and then we're going to do desserts and coffee service. And then we're going to kind of pick up glasses and refill waters. He went through the whole thing. And this onboarding, it took less than 5 minutes. So very small amount of investment on his part, but it made a huge difference. The events that night were like clockwork. They went off so well. And then what was cool was at the end of the night, he had all the staff from all 3 rooms gather in one empty room. And we got to eat the leftover wedding food, which was awesome because it's always really high quality. And he got up while we're eating as a team, and he praised the teams by room on what they did well. This room did this well. This room did this well. And this room, boy, you really hit it out with the, bride's mother. And so he's praising us that night. Now, I didn't see the guest satisfaction surveys, but I could almost guarantee you for those 3 wedding receptions that night, they were all 10 out of 10. And then it began to make sense to me because this venue is always busy and it's in a lousy location, has no view. It's out of the way. It's kind of a hassle to get there. And yet they are doing hundreds of events like this all year. Meanwhile, there's beautiful, more desirable locations with incredible views and, more central to the overall city. And those venues are sitting vacant way more than they're being used. These ballrooms are just empty night after night. Now, why is that? Well, I would argue that middle manager made all the difference. And if you were interviewing middle managers for the top position, would you hire the one that never trained the dishwasher how to clean out the machine and ended up with a train wreck where that wedding reception kind of went off the rails for a bit in the middle of a key part? So would you hire that middle manager, or would you hire the event manager who quickly but properly onboarded his staff within 5 minutes and was accessible to them and praised them at the end of the night for a job well done? Now, some of you naysayers, you're saying, how's an other employer going to know which manager did the good job? Neither's going to say I did a bad job. But the good manager, if you did a good job on that, you should go into future top job interviews armed with data. That manager at that really busy event center should say, I managed 212 events last year with an average guest satisfaction score of 9.6. Further, here's a glowing recommendation letter from both the owner of the venue as well as my supervisor, and maybe even some happy brides along the way. Collect those. Now, if you're not a good manager, if you're the one where the dishes were all being crashed to the ground, do you think you're going to be able to show those kind of measurables? No, because they're probably not very good. Your guest satisfaction survey might be 4 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. Nobody's excited to hire you for that. And do you know what your recommendation is going to be? If you get one, it's going to be an AI generated one. And good HR people are very quickly learning to sort out who just threw 3 buzzwords in there and told AI to make a recommendation and who actually wrote clear, concise, glowing praise for that manager. Which brings me to a final point, and this goes back to my advice from the top, which is not to suck up to your boss, but with a little twist. Do not, under any circumstances, grandstand at the bottom of the organization to try and put on a show for the top. Now, what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. In a hotel I worked in, there was an assistant manager who loved to put on a show for his boss. So from time to time, if he thought things were busy and he needed some brownie points, if you will, with the boss, he would go to the kitchen and don an apron. And he would do this strategically right before he knew the GM was going to walk through the kitchen on his way to the car to be done for the day. And this assistant was so pick-me. He would get a knife and he would cut a few vegetables or spray a few dishes. And then when the boss walked by, literally, as soon as the boss walked out the door, he would take the apron off and walk away. And the mess he left usually outweighed the pitifully meager amount of fake work he did. Another time, he'd made a big proclamation in front of the boss. He was going to jump in and help set rooms for some big events. And he did that while the GM was in the room. The GM was like, "Oh, thank you. You're the best." And then as soon as that ended, he literally walked out. Now, what do you think the staff thought about that? The staff, I'm going to put it frankly, they hated this guy. He had no viability with them, no credibility. They were the very people that made his analytics, and yet they wanted to hide on his watch. They didn't want to work hard for him. Here's a not surprising ending to his story. When the GM position opened up, he applied, but was not selected. And he quietly limped off in a lateral move. Don't be fake. If you're not really there to help, don't pretend you are, because you're going to lose your people. Now, let me tell you about a story on the flip side of a restaurant assistant manager that took care of his people even when nobody was watching. So in this particular restaurant, the evening dishwasher had to leave about 10 o'clock because the dishwasher rode the bus to and from work. But the restaurant was open till 11. And so depending on the busyness of the restaurant, there were always a bus tub or two, or sometimes if it was busy late, maybe 3 or 4 bus tubs full of dishes. And his previous manager would always leave them for the next morning for the AM dishwasher, which was a real bummer for that morning dishwasher to have 6 bus tubs of last night's dishes. Plus, then you've got cooks cooking breakfast and you've got caked on pans and then people are eating breakfast. It was like you started the day behind as a dishwasher. And it just was a really, not a great situation. And so this good manager at the end of the night, whatever time that was, 11 or 12, whenever the last dishes were collected from the restaurant and the bar, would go back to that dish tank, and it was an empty kitchen. The cooks had left. Nobody was around. And he would wash those dishes. And not only did he wash them, then he'd pile them up on the cart and he'd take them around and put them away. You know what happened when that AM dishwasher walked in? There wasn't a dish on the dish tank. And it was awesome because he could kind of get his bearings. He could stay ahead of the dishes. He didn't get behind on the morning rush. All this because an assistant manager saw a need and he wanted to help his team. He wanted to serve. He wanted to help out. And do you know what this manager did? He built a loyal back of house staff. Those people would run through a wall for him because he did the right thing even when no one was watching. And they knew he did because they saw the fruits of his labor. Which brings me back to 2 words for those of you in the middle. You are in both a precarious position and a position with tremendous possibility. Your job is precarious, so you need to get the most out of the people under you. Be the boss you wish you had. Learn people's names and use them. We all love to hear our names. It's part of the human psychology. Train me up to do the work you want me to do right from day one. Make me feel a part of the team. Take 5 simple minutes and you can avoid catastrophe down the road. And above all, don't be fake and grandstand for your boss, but look for opportunities to serve those under you and to make their lives better. If you can do that, your subordinates will respect you, they will work hard for you, they will help you achieve your goals. So that's it from the bottom. Simple. Learn names, train your people, and be genuinely helpful. If you can do this, you're on your way to higher employee retention and productivity, better customer satisfaction, better employee retention, and your shot at moving into the top job. If you need executive coaching and a game plan to move from the middle to the top in your career, book a free exploratory call with me. I would be super pumped to learn more about you, to get to know what challenges you're facing and where you want to go in your career. And then we'll make a game plan together to figure out how to get you there. Tune in next week for the next part of this series about how we talk specifically about what to do in your middle job that will make you stand out as a top performer and someone who is ready to move into the top chair.
If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on SuperPumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this super pumped adventure. And if you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day super pumped adventure in the wilderness.
Are you the assistant manager of a store, restaurant, hotel, or an assistant coach, or an assistant principal, or a vice president, or an executive director, or a senior vice president, or COO, or CFO? If you have people below you reporting to you and people above you giving directives to you, this series is for you. This series is, the whole mission is to try and help you position yourself to stand out in your position of middle leadership in your organization so that people consider you a candidate when the top positions opening up either at your organization or perhaps at other organizations. And so in episode 1, we kind of looked at these general headwinds of what makes your job perilous, but also some tailwinds of some trends that maybe give you some opportunities. And then in episode 2, we dove deep into the do's and don'ts of a relationship with your direct boss, things you should do, things you shouldn't do. Episode 3, we talked about how not to tank with your subordinates, how not to lose credibility with them and kind of lose the team. If you think about coaching, a lot of coaches, they get fired toward the middle or end of the season because the general manager or the owner say, yeah, we just felt like you lost the locker room. And that happens a lot. So today, though, I want to get into how do we boil all this down? What is the key thing? And I have struggled mightily to write this episode. I've had so many ideas, and I started and I thought, okay, there's 3 key ideas. And then I decided, no, it's 7 steps. And then that expanded and I went to 10. And then I have this amazing home library. It is incredible. But anyway, I start looking at the books in my home library and I start seeing David Goggins and Predictable Winners and Failure of Nerve and Malcolm Gladwell and Tipping Point and all of these books that I've read that have so much wisdom. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The 1 Minute Manager, all those things are popping through my head. And so all of a sudden my sheet just keeps getting longer and longer. And at one point I looked at it and I thought, I've got about 7 hours of podcast here in this one episode. And I thought, Joe Rogan, you got nothing on me. I can double you just in this episode. But that would have been miserable for me, for you, for everybody, the production team. And so I thought, actually, this is kind of fitting because a lot of you have read so many different management books and leadership books and self-help books, and you have all these ideas just floating around in your head. And there's a point where your head just wants to, it becomes too much, right? And so I thought, let's go the other way on this. I don't need to give people 121 talking points on what they should be doing in their career. And so I began to think, how do we boil this down to the most basic thing? And so I came up today with one thing, plain and simple thing that you can do in your career that will catapult you to the success you want. Plain and simple, your focus needs to be on people. That's all it comes down to. Right now, that is the number one challenge that people who come to me as clients tell me about. I can't find people. I can't, keep good people. I can't motivate my people. There's no one out there who wants to work. And it's a struggle, right? And we see that. We see that over and over. And so if we can figure out this people piece in your career and in our organizations, the sky is the limit. Think about just broadly, what is your position in middle management? You take a directive from a person at the top, right? And then you're tasked with as a person, trying to get all the people below you to enact that program, right? So you've got to motivate, again, people. And what is your team trying to do? Most likely, your team of people is trying to motivate other people outside your organization, who we will call customers, to buy your good or service or engage with your product, right? That's essentially what it comes down to. So it is people at the top, people in the middle, people at the bottom, and people outside the organization, all in this kind of weird harmony of success. Former President Ronald Reagan, who was this just incredible optimist, whether you agreed with his policies or didn't agree with his policies, he was sunny, he smiled, and he famously once said, "The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. The greatest leader is the one who gets the people to do the greatest things." And I thought that is so fitting for middle management. It is all about getting your people to do great things. So how do you do this? Well, first off, it requires a mindset shift. In your mind, here's what I want you to do. This is the exercise I want you to keep in mind. I want you to manage as though you are stuck with the current people you have on your team forever. There's no cutting them loose. There's no bringing in the reinforcements. There's no anything other than developing them, moving them around, moving them up, moving them down, moving them sideways, whatever you've got to do to get them moving. And here's why. Because when we think about all these amazing books that were written about all kinds of management and business and leadership, most of them, other than I think that I counted 2 or 3, all the rest of them were pre-pandemic. And before the pandemic, it wasn't utopia. Certainly it was hard to find people then, but it has become so much harder now. Think about the trends you have now. You have a low birth rate. You have a high retirement rate. You have AI coming in. You have technology. You have all those things. And then on top of that, immigration policies are becoming much more stringent. So the influx of immigrants, which historically in the United States has kind of just pushed labor into the market, that has gone to a trickle. And so it is harder than ever to get people. So this idea that you're going to somehow cut people loose and get new people is probably a little bit of fantasy land, if you will. So your mindset needs to be, okay, I have these people. These are my people. How can I get the most out of them? And all of a sudden, managing becomes less of what I'd call bad management, which is set it and forget it, to actively, daily trying to get people to do what you need them to do. That is all part of this whole key thing. Now, I want you to think back if you played any kind of sport, and I want you to think about an assistant football coach. And a lot of you maybe didn't play football, but I did. Think about what the job of an assistant coach is, whether this is in the high school level, the college level, or the professional level. They are given a certain number of players that are in their unit, right? And they are told to stop the other team as they try to march down the field. And the coach has these players for a season, right? If it's a high school, those are the kids that live in the district who went out for the team, made the team. They're your team. If it's college, that's your roster that year. And even though we have a transfer portal now, you're still stuck with that unit for that specific year. And in the pros, you can't just go to the GM and be like, yeah, these guys aren't very good. Bring me in 3 all-pro, D linemen. I mean, everybody would love to do that. That doesn't happen. So their job every day is to try and work with their players to get the most out of them, to improve their technique and their skills and their conditioning, all the things that go into what they do to do their job well or not well. And a good coach even though the guys in his unit are all defensive linemen, right? A good defensive lineman coach is going to move those guys around. Boy, this guy's really good as an edge rusher, but this guy, he's better in the middle, right off the center, or kind of pushing the pile back, if you will. And so they begin to figure out, even within those roles, who's better on different spots. And then if he has a star player, he thinks, okay, I can leverage the star into a double team over here, which means I can maybe get to the quarterback on the backside more often because they've got 3 guys focused on my star. Or you might have another team where you've got 10 defensive linemen and they're all pretty much average. Like there's no one that really stands out, no one that's really terrible. Well, that coach may decide, you know what? We are going to rotate these guys in. Basically, all the guys are going to play half the game instead of, a small set playing the whole game and the rest sitting on the bench. But we are going to wear down our opponent because every time we send a new guy in, he's going to be fresh and he's going to get after it and he's going to be good. And by the time we roll around to the late third and early fourth quarter, man, we're going to be getting after it. We're going to be getting stops because we've schemed this up. And so this coach, think about how a coach, if you've played a sport, every day they come and their job is make you better. Compare that to a lot of our corporate teams where you have a manager or an assistant over a team, right? And you never see them. They're hiding in their office or they're on their phone or we talked about it in one of the episodes, sucking up to the boss and kind of doing that whole thing. And they're really not coaching you up, right? That is so common in business to have these squads of people, these teams of people that we're not coaching up and they're just kind of floating along in mediocrity. Well, I can tell you, if you want to move out of the middle in your organization, floating along in mediocrity with your teams isn't the way to do that. And so you have got to get better. You've got to coach up your people. You've got to get in the trenches with them like a football coach. Think about that. I'm not saying you got to scream at your people, but you got to fire them up and you got to try things. You got to say, okay, this person's good, not good, whatever. So you're doing all of that, right? In our world today, our post-pandemic world, you can't just pull new people in off the street very easily. Because if you decide, oh, that's my solution, I'm just going to fire people and pull in new people, you're probably going to have a lot of vacant chairs. If you have people right now that show up regularly with a decent attitude, I don't even need them to have a great attitude, just show up regularly with an okay attitude, you can coach them up to success. If you invest yourself in them, if you work with them, if you say, I see greatness in you. And the thing is, lots of other companies are willing to do that. So why aren't you? Think about it. You have existing employees that are underperforming, but you've already onboarded them. You already have them in the building. They're familiar with everything, right? You've already paid for the Indeed ad to get them, and you've paid for the background checks and the drug tests and all that kind of upfront cost, right? Get the most out of them. Start moving them around until you get them in a position that's right for them and right for you. In my cleaning business, even pre-pandemic, we had trouble getting cleaning workers. And like most people, we'd hire people into a specific location and a specific job. For us, that was the beginning, not the end. And so many organizations, we hire in a position and then we kind of set it and forget it. That's the end of it. We did the opposite. We put these people in that initial role, but then it was the job of our management team, our middle managers, to begin to see, okay, this person maybe isn't aligned quite right here. Or this location isn't quite right for them. And I want to give you a kind of a cool example. So we hired a woman to work at a FedEx airport facility, which is awesome in terms of just the amount of activity coming in. So you got planes coming in on one side, right? And then you've got the trucks coming in on the other side. So when a plane comes in, man, everybody is mobilized and they are attacking that plane, getting that cargo off, getting it on the conveyor belts, and then it's going over to the other side and they're loading it on the trucks. And then the opposite, when they have the schedule, when all the trucks kind of collect all the stuff and bring them in, and then the planes are flying off to the West Coast or to the East Coast or wherever they're going, it is a busy time. We were tasked with cleaning a lot of space really quickly. There were these really short windows of downtime in between a plane coming in and the trucks coming in or out, vice versa. And so we had to bulldog through that work, right? In really quick order. And so we hired this woman, and she had a great attitude. She showed up on time. She was in uniform, smile on her face, and she did really high quality work. But the problem was she was not fast enough. And we kept working with her and the manager he would try to train and retrain her. And she just couldn't get that work rate down fast enough. So she'd still have big piles of mess or trash that wasn't collected. And then the next plane or the next trucks would come in, and then she'd be further behind. And the customer was getting pretty irritated because they're like, look, we got to get this done. And she just wasn't cutting it. In another account, it was a law office, right? And if you've ever been in many law offices, everything's pretty buttoned up in a law office. So you've got your magazines on your, in your waiting room, and people can leaf through those, and they want those just so, and they don't want, smudges on the glass. So there's a amount of detail work. And several of the partners had their own private restroom. And of course, those had to be like spit shined immaculate, right? And we had a guy in there, and he was fine, what I would call maybe more of a trash and dash guy. And almost every week he would get hammered on the fact that he didn't put the magazines back right, or he didn't get the partner's office quite right, or they had a lot of knickknacks and trinkets, little treasures, I guess they accumulated all over the world. So he wouldn't dust those quite right or put them back just in the right order. And so here we had another unhappy customer, and we were like, okay, what are we going to do? The manager came to me and he said, I know what we're going to do. We're going to flip these two. We're going to take the guy who isn't quite cutting it on the details end out of the law office, and we're going to throw him in at the airport working on FedEx. And we're going to take this woman who does great work, but she's super slow, and we're going to put her in the law office where she can take her time and dust every, little thing. And sure enough, we took two employees who on their surface were failing in their jobs, who were possibly jeopardizing our account, our customers, flipped them, and both came with incredible results. Now, what do you think we do with that manager? We say, that's a manager who's actually managing. He's seeing his people, he's coaching them up, and he's even moving them around in the organization so that they have that idea of success. That's what you need to do. You need to stop worrying about, they don't fit, let's fire them and move on. You need to train your people up. You need to get them working. And it's really cool when you do. It's so gratifying. I also saw this a lot in my restaurant business. People tend to think I'm a back of house person or a front of house. Now, front of house means you're out. You might be a server, a bartender, a host or hostess, maybe a floor manager, that type of thing. That's front of house. It's kind of customer engaging. And then back of house is the people who wash the dishes and cut the fruits and vegetables and make the food and run the stuff back and forth. And what we would often find is people would say, I want to be back of house. And then you'd realize, they're pretty chatty and they're not getting through the number of, onions they need to chop to be able to put them on the line. Or, someone in the front of the house was almost abrasively rude because they were so busy just doing their job. Can I take your order? I need your order now. I got other stuff to do, like that kind of thing. And so you quickly realize, just because we hired you in one or the other doesn't mean this is a fail. It just means we have put you in the wrong spot within our organization. And it is incumbent on us as leaders and as middle managers to find the right fit for our people. Because again, it is way easier to move people around within your organization than to start from scratch. Now, some of you may say, that's fine in service industries. That doesn't apply in my organization. But I'm telling you, if you get serious and you get honest with yourself and you look up and down your organizational chart, I guarantee you can pick several people in your organization where you say, yeah, they're there and they're maybe doing an okay job, but just based on what I know about them, they would really kill it over here in this realm. This person's in ops, but man, they would be great in sales or, whatever that is. And so you've got to start digging in on that. I attend a lot of corporate conferences. And so one of the fun things I like, because I like to get to know people, I'm always super pumped about that. And, when you're waiting for something to start, or maybe you're at the restaurant or the bar or after the conference or before, and you start talking to people and you say, what do you do with the company? And you can tell very quickly whether someone's passionate about what they're doing or not. I do this. And they're kind of giving you a half-baked elevator speech with no energy, right? You've been there. So you think, they really don't love what they're doing. But then you get to talking to them later. Maybe you see them again. And somehow they get to talking about a hobby, or they get to talking about a special project they worked on in the company. And it's like this light comes on in them, right? And they're like, wow, it was really cool. We did a great job and we delivered this, or, I was about this. And you begin to realize as an outsider, and I'm not in that organization, they put this person in the wrong role. The role they're in, they have no passion, no excitement, no enthusiasm for, right? But this other thing that either they worked on in a single project, or maybe it's an outside pursuit, but there would be something similar, analogous in their organization, that's where they need to be. But nobody's seeing it because nobody's engaged with that person. Nobody's down in the trenches, coaching them up, trying to figure out, how do we get that motor running a little hotter, a little harder, a little faster? We have to see people. And it extends beyond just our employees. We have to see our customers too. I want to tell you an example from the hotel world where I've been a part of for the last few years. In big hotels, there are a lot of front desk managers, a lot of middle managers. There's a lot of middle managers in hotels in general, but a lot of middle managers because hotels are 24/7, 365, right? And so there was a hotel manager who came in and she began to think about the customer beyond just give them a key, send them to their room, give them a key, send them to their room. Because that's like the bare minimum, right? But that doesn't make you stand out one hotel to another. And so she began to dig into her guest satisfaction surveys, and particularly what she called her elite member satisfaction surveys. And what she found was that those on the very lowest level of the elite level, I think they were silver in that organization, weren't very happy. Like their overall scores were, I believe, below 50%. And so she thought, how can we make these customers feel more loved? And so she began to work with her team on things they could do. And it was a collaboration, which was cool. So they began to say, well, let's thank them for being an elite member. And we appreciate your business, which simple, doesn't cost them anything, doesn't take much time, 4 or 5 seconds. So she did that. And then she trained up her team. If it was, maybe a night where occupancy was only at 40 or 50%, or, low, not capacity, can we look for an upgrade? Let's find them a better room, either a bigger room or a suite, or maybe a room with a cool city view versus just looking out on the alley or the trash bins or that kind of thing. And do you know what happened when she saw those customers as people who were a little bit unhappy with their experience? Those scores began to skyrocket. And do you know what happened to that manager? Because she saw those customers, those people, and engaged with her people under her to deliver something better, she separated herself from all those other front desk managers. All of a sudden, she was the one in line for promotion, all because she saw the people and she worked with the people to change that dynamic, to improve that experience. She began to want more for them. That is really awesome. And that's what I want to see out of all of you. I want you to start seeing people, the people under you, the people above you, and the people that are paying for your good and service. And I want you to make your singular focus, how can I make things better for all of those people? Because if you can do that, I guarantee you, you will put yourself on a pathway to success. Now, if you need help game planning or kind of talking through your specific situation and how we can position you best to be able to do this, I would love to talk to you. Just book a call and we will talk and get you on that path.
Along this journey, I'm not just seeking adventure and renewal. I'm carving out space we so often don't have, to think about and to ponder and to meditate and to pray on life's bigger questions. What is the meaning of life? Where does God exist? Does God exist? How do I fit into the cosmos? What is my purpose? These things that so often we just can't even take the time to put the mental energy into. I have 40 days to dig into that. And along the way, I hope I can muster the courage to be vulnerable, to share some of those struggles that I'll be going through. and also some of the cool discoveries and thoughts and adventures that come my way. I would be so grateful if you told your friends about it, and also if you subscribed or followed us so that you don't miss future episodes. If you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day super pumped adventure in the wilderness. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you tomorrow.